You hear them before you see them, footsteps echoing through stone corridors. You're 17, pressed against cold palace walls, breath caught in your throat. Through a splintered gap, you watch men with torches burst into your father's chamber. The screaming starts, your father's voice, raw and animal. But it's what happens after the screaming stops that you'll carry forever. They don't just kill him, they methodically destroy the body piece by piece until nothing human remains. And watching your future written in your father's blood, something inside you crystallizes, a truth that will separate you from every other ruler of your age, even your cousin Vlad. The year is 1451, and you're witnessing the murder of Bogdan II, Prince of Moldavia. What no one in that blood-soaked palace can know is that this night is forging a predator who will make Vlad the Impaler look like an amateur. A ruler whose methods will be so coldly efficient, so strategically terrifying, that his own cousin, a man who impaled thousands without hesitation, will watch what this man does to the Ottomans and recognize something that disturbs even him. His name was Stephen, later called the Great, but the title hides a darker truth. He was the one monster who terrified other monsters. Stephen flees that night and finds sanctuary with his cousin in Wallachia, Vlad Draculaea, barely older than Stephen, already developing his reputation for theatrical brutality. Both are teenage refugees, sons of murdered fathers with nothing left to lose, but from the beginning, their approaches to power diverge in ways that will define them. Vlad is building his legend through spectacle. He wants enemies to see forests of impaled bodies, to spread stories of his cruelty, to scream his name as they die. It's effective, certainly. Vlad's reputation alone makes enemies hesitate, but Stephen watches his cousin with the analytical detachment of a student identifying flaws in a teacher's method. Stephen is learning a different lesson entirely. He's learning that the most effective terror is the kind that leaves no witnesses, no bodies, no stories, just empty spaces where people used to be, and a growing understanding that opposition means erasure. Not dramatic death, but complete disappearance. And here's what makes their relationship fascinating. Vlad sees what Stephen is becoming and recognizes something that even he, a man who personally supervises impalements, who dines among dying victims, who's made cruelty his signature, finds unsettling. Stephen doesn't enjoy the suffering. He doesn't need the spectacle. He simply eliminates problems with the cold efficiency of a surgeon removing tumours. Vlad later tells his advisors that Stephen's methods are more terrible than impalement, for they leave nothing behind, not even the fear, only the forgetting. Coming from Vlad the Impaler, that's not criticism, it's recognition of a superior predator. By April 1457, Vlad reclaims his throne and eliminates enemies in his signature style. He invites hundreds of boyars to an Easter feast, then springs his trap. Older nobles are impaled in public displays, younger ones are marched to rebuild his ruined castle until their hands are ruined and clothes fall off their bodies. It's brutal, memorable, and frees up 6,000 cavalry that Vlad sends north to help Stephen reclaim Moldavia. At Doljești on April 12, 1457, Stephen faces Petru Aron, his father's murderer. Vlad expects his cousin to match or exceed the Easter massacre's brutality. Instead, Stephen does something that troubles even the Impaler. There's no theatrical vengeance or public torture. Stephen simply destroys Aron's forces with clinical efficiency. And then, in the days that follow, something happens that Vlad's own chroniclers will describe as more chilling than any forest of stakes. Aron's surviving soldiers vanish, not scattered in defeat, literally disappear. Stephen's forces hunt them through forests and marshes with such systematic thoroughness that within a week it's as if Aron's army never existed. No survivors straggle into neighbouring territories, no prisoners are paraded, no bodies are displayed, just silence where thousands of men used to be. When Stephen accepts his crown, he mirrors none of Vlad's theatrical displays of power. He speaks of God's will, of humble service, of duty. He positions himself as a pious instrument of divine justice, while Vlad openly revels in his reputation as the Impaler. When Sultan Mehmed II sends his ultimatum in 1474 demanding Stephen surrender strategic ports or face invasion, Vlad counsels a dramatic refusal, perhaps executing the messengers in memorable fashion. Stephen does something that makes even Vlad pause. He simply ignores the ultimatum entirely, as if the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire were beneath acknowledgement. But behind this calculated silence, he's preparing something that will demonstrate to both the Ottomans and his cousin Vlad what true strategic terror looks like. In December 1474, when the Ottoman invasion force of 100,000 men enters Moldavia, Vlad sends observers to see how his cousin will handle an army that dwarfs anything the Impaler has ever faced. What they witness and report back will haunt Vlad for the rest of his life. The Ottoman army finds themselves marching through an increasingly hostile wasteland. Villages abandoned, wells poisoned, the very landscape weaponized against them. Vlad's observers note this is scorched earth policy, yes, but executed with a precision that exceeds anything Vlad has attempted. He has made the earth itself his ally, one report states, not through chaos, but through calculated design. On January 10th, 1475, at the Battle of Vaslui, the engagement will show the difference between Vlad's theatrical cruelty and Stephen's strategic annihilation. Dawn breaks cold and misty over the Rakova Valley. You're an Ottoman soldier in Suleiman Pasha's vanguard, exhausted from weeks of marching through wasteland, thinking about rest and food. You've been part of armies that conquered Constantinople, that swept through the Balkans, that made empires tremble. This tiny Christian principality should be nothing. The bridge ahead looks solid, Byzantine stonework, ancient and reliable. Your cavalry begins crossing, and suddenly the world breaks apart beneath you. The bridge collapses, but not randomly. Stone supports give way in sequence, precisely timed, dumping entire cavalry units into the marshy valley below, where they become trapped in freezing mud. This is the moment Stephen has engineered. Ottoman forces are now split, some trapped in the marsh, others bottlenecked on the far bank, the main army compressed behind them, unable to maneuver. Then Stephen's artillery opens fire. From 3 concealed positions on the surrounding ridges, Moldavian bombards unleash hell. But here's what makes it terrifying. Stephen has positioned his guns with mathematical precision, so their fields of fire overlap, creating a kill zone where every square foot is covered by at least 2 artillery pieces. The Ottomans have nowhere to shelter. Through dense fog, you can't see your killers. You hear the whistle of cannonballs cutting through mist, the wet impact of iron through flesh and bone, the screams of men dying beside you, and the crack of artillery from positions you cannot locate. The fog itself is part of Stephen's weapon. He studied this valley, knows the morning mist settles thick enough to blind an army, but thin enough for his forces, who know every contour of this terrain, to navigate by sound and memory. Ottoman commanders try to organize formations they cannot see. Orders are shouted into fog and lost. Units fire at sounds that might be enemies, or might be their own men dying. And then the sky goes black. 4,000 Moldavian archers positioned on the valley slopes have been waiting in absolute silence. Now they loose, not by seeing targets, but by following the sound of screaming, the ring of Ottoman steel, the chaos of an army trapped and blind. Arrows fall like black rain through the fog. You watch the man beside you sprout 3 shafts from his chest before he even understands he's under attack. Another takes an arrow through his eye, the force spinning him around before he drops. The arrows keep coming, wave after wave, thousands of shafts fired by men who've turned slaughter into rhythm. Suleiman Pasha tries to rally his vanguard to push through the kill zone. This is when Stephen unleashes his main assault, but not as a charge, as a 3-pronged encirclement executed with precision that shouldn't be possible in fog this thick. His commanders know exactly where to strike because Stephen has wargamed every scenario, positioned his forces not where the enemy is, but where the geometry of the valley will force them to be. The Moldavian heavy cavalry hits the Ottoman right flank just as they're trying to wheel away from the artillery. The impact is catastrophic. Lances punch through armour, horses trample men already wounded by arrows. But Stephen's cavalry doesn't stop to engage. They strike and wheel away, herding the Ottomans deeper into the kill zone where the artillery is already reloading. On the left flank, Stephen's infantry, peasants with pikes and axes, do something that makes Vlad's observers take note. They don't fight with desperate courage or religious fervour, they fight with cold, coordinated brutality, using terrain advantages Stephen has prepared in advance. Ottoman soldiers trying to climb the valley slopes find themselves funneled into narrow paths where Moldavian axemen wait in groups of 6, working together to methodically butcher anyone who reaches them. The battle transforms into surgical extermination. Retreat? Stephen's cavalry already blocks your escape. Advance? The ground ahead is studded with caltrops and concealed pits. Hold position? Artillery shreds you where you stand. The fog that should protect both armies equally has become Stephen's weapon through pure tactical mastery. 40,000 Moldavians are killing 100,000 Ottomans not through superior numbers or equipment, but through superior geometry, timing, and terrain knowledge. It's not battle as the Ottomans know it, it's entrapment. By afternoon, when the fog finally lifts, the valley is carpeted with Ottoman dead. Vlad's observers report the scene with words that don't quite capture the scale. Bodies stacked so thick in some areas that you could walk across the valley without touching ground. The marsh where the cavalry first fell has turned into a mass grave of men and horses drowned in mud, frozen in positions of terror. The artillery kill zones are marked by circles of destruction so complete that not a single body remains intact. But it's what happens that truly demonstrates Stephen's methodology. The Ottoman survivors, perhaps 40,000 men, try to retreat. They expect pursuit, perhaps harassment by cavalry, the normal aftermath of medieval defeat. Instead, they experience something unprecedented. Stephen doesn't let them retreat. He activates the second phase of his plan. For 3 days, Moldavian forces hunt the fleeing Ottomans with systematic precision, not in one mass pursuit, but in coordinated groups that drive survivors into predetermined kill zones. Stephen has positioned reserve forces along every escape route, turned the entire region into an extended battlefield. Ottoman soldiers who think they've escaped find themselves ambushed 20 miles from Vaslui. The survivors are eliminated in small groups, sometimes dozens at a time, sometimes just a handful. No dramatic massacres, no public executions, just systematic elimination that continues until resistance becomes impossible. But what unfolds next reveals the true sophistication of Stephen's psychological warfare, and what makes it more terrifying than anything Vlad has conceived. After destroying 40,000 Ottomans, Stephen doesn't celebrate with Vlad's style of feasting among impaled corpses. Instead, he fasts for 40 days on bread and water. He forbids anyone to attribute victory to him, insisting all credit goes to God. He positions himself not as a brutal conqueror, but as a humble instrument of divine will. When Vlad hears of this, he understands immediately what his cousin has achieved. "I make men fear me," Vlad reportedly tells his council. "Stephen makes men believe God fights through him, while I create terror through visible cruelty. He creates terror through invisible righteousness." Pope Sixtus IV awards Stephen the title Athleta Christi, Champion of Christ. The same church that views Vlad with suspicion despite his defense of Christendom celebrates Stephen as God's warrior. Vlad, who has fought the Ottomans as fiercely as Stephen, receives no such honours. The difference isn't in their actions, but in their presentation. When Sultan Mehmed II, conqueror of Constantinople, personally leads 150,000 men into Moldavia in 1476 to avenge Vaslui, Vlad sends observers again, perhaps hoping to see his cousin finally overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Instead, they witness something even more disturbing. Stephen doesn't try to repeat Vaslui's tactics, he adapts. When Mehmed's Tatar cavalry attacks from the north, Stephen's forces rout them so completely that survivors throw themselves into the Dnieper River rather than face continued pursuit. After weeks of campaign and losing 30,000 soldiers, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire retreats from tiny Moldavia without capturing a single major fortress. The final years crystallize the difference between the cousins. Vlad dies in 1476, killed in ambush, his head sent to Constantinople as a trophy. his name becomes synonymous with monstrosity, his legend eventually inspiring Dracula. Stephen rules until 1504, acclaimed by his people, honoured by the church and remembered as Christendom's defender. Historians note that Stephen built 40 churches and monasteries. What they often omit is that Vlad also patronised religious institutions, also defended Christianity, and fought the Ottomans with unwavering commitment. But one cousin wore his brutality openly and became a monster in history. The other concealed his brutality beneath piety and became a saint. The Romanian Orthodox Church canonised Stephen as a saint. No such honours awaited Vlad. Yet the evidence suggests Stephen's elimination of domestic enemies was more systematic, his body count higher, his methods more ruthlessly efficient. He simply understood that the most successful monsters control their own narratives and convince the world their calculated cruelty was divine necessity. In the end, what Stephen did to the Ottomans terrified even Vlad, because it revealed a truth the Impaler never wanted to face, that his forests of stakes, his theatrical displays and his honest brutality were the methods of someone who still needed the spectacle. Stephen needed nothing but results, and his results were absolute.